Day one of the Shanghai Corporation Organization Summit in Samarkand saw a series of key bilaterals among world leaders. Ukraine war, tensions over Taiwan and the deepening partnership between nations were some of the key agendas discussed in the meetings. The leaders were seen enjoying a formal dinner at the end of the day. Among several bilaterals, the most crucial one was between the Chinese president and his Russian counterpart. This was the first time Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin held in-person talks since the war in Ukraine began. Putin thanked the Chinese leader for his balanced position on Ukraine, but also said that he understood Beijing's questions and concerns over the conflict. The Russian president condemned attempts by the West to create a unipolar world. Putin also explicitly backed China over Taiwan, saying that Moscow firmly adheres to the One China policy. The Russian president instead condemned U.S. provocations in the Taiwan Strait. Meanwhile, Xi told Putin that Beijing was willing to work with Moscow as great powers.
Facing an ever-changing world, era and history, China is willing to make efforts with Russia to assume the role of great powers and play a guiding role to inject stability and positive energy into a world rocked by social turmoil.
This is Xi Jinping's first overseas trip since the start of the pandemic. It comes as the Chinese president seeks a historic third term. The SCO Summit will see the gathering of leaders from all the heavyweights in Central Asia, including Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Kremlin said that while Putin was set to meet other leaders, that his meeting with Xi Jinping was of particular importance. Currently, Russia has been isolated by the West. China's relations with the West, too, have soured recently, following tensions over self-ruled Taiwan. The two leaders last met at the Winter Olympics in Beijing this year. Following that meeting, the two countries have said the friendship between them had no limits. Russia invaded Ukraine days later, an action that China has neither condemned nor supported. Since then, Moscow and Beijing have been actively strengthening ties. China is not part of the international sanctions against Russia. Trade between the two countries have continued to grow. Chinese imports of Russian oil have been soaring since the invasion. China and Russia have long sought to position the SCO as an alternative to Western multilateral groups. Meanwhile, Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif also held a meeting with Putin. The two leaders discussed bilateral ties and exchanged views on international issues. Shehbaz Sharif thanked Putin for solidarity and support during the recent floods in Pakistan. The premier also held bilaterals with the leaders of Iran, Belarus and Kyrgyzstan. On day two of SCO Summit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will hold crucial bilaterals, or the Indian Prime Minister will be meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two are expected to discuss issues of strategic ability, situation in the Asia-Pacific, and bilateral cooperation within the United Nations and G20. However, there is still no clarity on whether the Indian Prime Minister will hold any bilateral with his Chinese president. The second day of the summit will also see all heads of state and member nations gather for the main meeting, which means leaders of Russia, China, India, Pakistan, and 4 Central Asian nations will come face to face. And for more on the summit, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibal has sent us this report from Samarkand.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's key focus area at Samarkand's SCO Summit will be on issues like counter-terrorism, on issues like connectivity, trade, situation in Afghanistan. Of course, he's just here in Samarkand for 24 hours, in which his focus will be to participate in the SCO Summit, where India will be handed over the presidency of the grouping. We also know that he has key bilaterals as well with the Iranian president, with the Russian president, and with the Uzbek president, who is, of course, the host of the meeting. But if you look at will he meet the Chinese president Xi Xi Jinping or the Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is the big question. There is a lot of if regarding meetings, because we know that how relationship, if we talk about India and China, has deteriorated since the deadly border clashes of 2020, the Galwan incident in which India lost 20 of its soldiers. China also suffered casualties, but it's a number which is highly doubted. But when it comes to Pakistan, relationship remains in a deep freeze. But a policy side is something that nobody is ruling out, given the fact just recently the Indian Prime Minister extended his condolences to the Pakistani side over the devastating flood. So packed agenda at the SCO, not just of the Indian Prime Minister but other world leaders. We saw the meeting between the Russian and the Chinese side, something that the West is closely watching. With video journalist Ajit Siddhant Sibal for WION in Samarkand, Uzbekistan.